The first news story that I read this morning while I was drinking my coffee really put a big smile on my face, and I want to share it with you. So I first saw it published in the Huffington Post, but later The Hill put out a piece on it, and that's what I'm going to be referencing here. So I've made a number of videos about how big law, I think it's like 8 law firms now, including Skadden and Paul Weiss, have betrayed the American people and capitulated to Donald Trump. Actually, a number of members of Congress sent letters to those law firms saying, your cooperation, your appeasement measures may actually be in violation of various state and federal laws. So just like heads up, when accountability comes, it may also come for you, big law, not just the members of the Trump regime, right? We are now seeing these big law firms that have promised hundreds of millions of dollars of free legal service to the Trump regime for the causes that Trump cares about. And that is pro bono work that they are not only giving to Trump, but all of those hours they were previously giving in pro bono work to worthy clients, worthy causes. So it's not just that they are aiding Trump and his horrible fascist agenda now, it's also that these previously self-proclaimed, like Democratic and progressive and liberal law firms are now withdrawing their legal advice and support from all kinds of worthy causes. It's like a 1-2 punch. And why did all of these big law firms immediately buckle when Trump tried to shake them down? Paul Weiss, a law firm which called themselves a champion of democratic causes, was the first to fold, but others have subsequently also bent the knee. And we're like, why did they all do this? Especially because law firms like Perkins Coie out of Seattle, they stood up. They said, absolutely not. We are not going to be intimidated in this way. You are not going to shake us down. We are not going to fold. We know that what you're doing, Trump, is illegal. Your executive orders are illegal. Your demands are illegal. And guess what? The court has backed Perkins Coie because the things that Trump is trying to do are illegal. And so why is it that all of these big law firms, they didn't join together with other law firms and form a united coalition standing up, right? Why is it that they let Trump pick them off one by one? Why didn't they go to their friends and colleagues and say, hey, he's coming for all of these law firms that have historically stood up for democratic causes? We need to band together now and hold the line. Why didn't they do that? Well, because these big law firms are in support of democratic causes, they are all run by exceptionally rich people. People who really care about their big fat salaries, their profit margin. And part of that is that they represent clients that require them to have a security clearance. And part of what Trump was doing was wanting to yank their security clearance. And Paul Weiss and Skadden were like, oh shit, we're going to lose money. So I just want to be clear, these law firms sold out the American people. These law firms sold out democracy. These law firms capitulated to the fascist regime of Donald Trump for money. Someone in the comments of one of my videos where I talked about this previously said, lawyers know how to follow the law, but that doesn't mean that they know how to follow their values. Or I would argue like that they even have them. And we've seen the American people be very demoralized by the way big law is folding, right? These big, powerful, wealthy institutions that have the capacity, that have the bandwidth to stand up and that claim they care about democracy, they're folding. That's really demoralizing to your average person who doesn't have the expertise and the massive financial resources and the sway of these big law firms. And so when these stories first broke, people were really disheartened. They're like, well, fuck. Like even the lawyers who are supposed to be standing up for us, they're falling in line with what Trump wants. And then we saw Perkins Coie stand up, and then we saw the court align with Perkins Coie, and then we saw universities stand up, and then we've seen a number of independent journalists and small newspapers stand up. And then we saw attorneys like Rachel Cohen stand up to the law firms that they work for. She worked for Skadden. We're seeing clients leave these big law firms. Collaborators with Trump, they need to face backlash for what they're doing. There needs to be consequences. And clearly, the only language that they speak is money. They don't have ethics. They just care about their profit margin. And so losing big clients is not a great scene for them. But even more than that, losing their lawyers that attract people to their firm in the first place, that's a huge blow. And guess what? We are seeing more and more lawyers say, how dare you, to the big law firms that they work for, and they're quitting. And so this morning's headline is that a number of top lawyers at Paul Weiss have decided to quit because Paul Weiss made a deal with the Trump regime. 4 of the top lawyers at Paul Weiss announced late yesterday, Friday, that they would depart from their roles as partners at the law firm. We're not talking associates, we're talking partners at the law firm are like, we cannot do this. They're going to go form their own law firm, one that won't bend the knee to Trump. And their names are Bill Isaacson, Jeannie Rhee, Jessica Phillips, and Karen Dunn. And to those 4 attorneys, I want to say thank you for having courage. Thank you for standing up. So Paul Weiss agreed to get rid of their DEI policy and agreed to allow Trump's people to come in and audit their hiring and employment practices. So they sold out all of their non-white male attorneys and staff. Again, this is a law firm that said they cared about pro-democracy causes. They've had clients like Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris, which is why Trump went for them. But also, Paul Weiss agreed to provide at least $40 million in pro bono work to the causes the Trump administration cares about. And in response to that, 4 of the partners said, we can't work for Paul Weiss anymore. We're leaving. Right? So this was a classic shakedown. Trump issued an executive order that was not good for Paul Weiss's business. And so Brad Karp, the chair of Paul Weiss, agreed to do what Trump demanded in order to have that executive order lifted. Perkins Coie didn't do anything that Trump wanted. They said, we'll see you in court. And guess what? A judge lifted the executive order. Guess what? Perkins Coie didn't have to sell their soul and betray the American people to get that outcome. Prominent lawyer Mark Zaid said of Paul Weiss and other law firms that have folded like a chair for Trump that they made this decision to simply capitulate in fear rather than stand up for the rule of law and the ethical principles that guide lawyers. This move of these 4 lawyers to leave is incredibly important. Institutions and corporations that choose to uphold a fascist regime, they need to face consequences. When those folks decided that they were going to be collaborators with the Trump regime, they were looking at their profit margin. They were saying, it is better for us. We're going to make more money if we side with Trump. And they didn't add into their calculation what happens when our clients leave us and our lawyers leave us. What happens when the post-Trump era comes far sooner than we were anticipating. There needs to be heavy consequences for collaborators. And it's really good to see people within these institutions saying, I'm not willing to be a part of this. I'm not willing to sell my soul to Donald Trump for money. To see them stand up, find their courage, and walk away. Whether we work inside those corporations or institutions, or whether we're just lay people on the outside, we need to make it as painful as possible for those folks to bend the knee and to collaborate. We need to make sure other law firms, other institutions see that you will face backlash if you're a coward and you fold for Trump. We need to be supporting the folks who stand up and have courage. We need to be elevating them like these 4 lawyers. We need to be setting forth examples of people who are willing to hold the line and stand up. Because when we watch other people have courage, we find our own courage. Folks are now reading the room and saying, these corporations and institutions, folks like Paul Weiss, folks like Skadden, folks like Columbia University, who bent the knee for Trump, they are now seen as bad guys. They're now seen in a very negative light. This is not panning out for them the way that they thought it was going to. So when they're taking the temperature, they're saying, we're watching millions of people march in the streets in April and in May. We're looking at the massive Veterans Day event that's happening on June 6th. We're looking forward to the No Kings Day on June 14th. All of these massive shows of public resistance. We're looking at the backlash in the press. We're looking at lawyers leaving. We're looking at clients leaving. Donors, clients, employees, they're all saying, we don't want anything to do with you. You have poisoned yourself. You've poisoned your business. You've poisoned your brand, just like Elon Musk poisoned Tesla. We don't want anything to do with you because you are now tainted by the authoritarian regime of Donald Trump. You have chosen to associate yourself, not with the American people, but with a tyrant, and we don't want anything to do with you. And so when other folks see that that is happening, they are much more likely to resist. And that's what we need. We need everybody resisting, every institution, every corporation, every individual, every community. We all need to be holding the line together. And there needs to be a consequence for people who betray us and step out. I was really encouraged to see the story of Bill Isaacson, Jeannie Rhee, Jessica Phillips, and Karen Dunn, who were willing to stand up for what's right, willing to walk away from their jobs and say, we absolutely will not be party to what Paul Weiss has done. And I hope there's a lot more of this. More people need to find their courage. The more of us that stand up, the more we resist, the stronger we become. And we need to make sure that there's heavy backlash for collaborators. Anytime folks are willing to stand up and resist, that's a great thing. Not just because what they're doing will make a big difference, but also because they are inspiring other people to find their courage. The way that we stop this is through a massive solidarity movement. We all need to stand up and stand strong together. So I'm really, really encouraged by this story today.